Welcome to the Soul Archaeology podcast, a space for connection, resonance, witnessing, and learning. Together we'll harvest medicine from the spiral of life, sharing conversations with other embodied humans who have navigated their own initiations and found alignment with their true soul essence. With weekly astrology, energy updates, embodied conversation, and channeled teachings, this is a space for you to land and find resonance with the spiral of your own soul. Welcome back to Soul Archaeology. I'm so happy to be here with you all. It's such a big week. There's a lot of sort of like volatility in the air, a lot of cracking open opportunities to witness ourselves in a deeper way through a more clear, truthful lens. A lot of sort of reckoning energy, which is interesting. It can be sort of confronting and can feel like we are being attacked in some ways. And that's a lot of what I want to talk about today is the spaces that we get stuck within that keep us small and looping. On Monday the 5th, we have Mercury in Aquarius, which just entered Aquarius on the 4th. We have it conjunct Pluto. And this is an opportunity to witness ourselves more deeply. Mercury is the planet of communication, and it really opens up our mental processes, and Pluto's the underworld, and it's our subconscious, and it's where we store the traumas, the beliefs, the wounds that keep us held in the underworld, that keep us sort of detached from our power. And Pluto's job really is to reveal, it's to surface, and Mercury it rules the mind, so when we think about these two together, it's surfacing what's hidden within the mind, where we operate from, the spaces and the places that we are afraid to go. And so this is really an opportunity to harness what's been surfacing, and what begins to surface through the beginning of this week to really get into those spaces that we can't always access. So much of what happens on a day-to-day basis is unconscious. We kind of get into these loops and these patterns, and these thoughts can really start to run our lives until we drop into the body, until we realize what's actually occurring, until we are able to interrupt that loop and witness ourselves. And sometimes these loops are big and long, and sometimes they've been there for decades. And the thing with Pluto is that it surfaces right when it's meant to. So perhaps there's a belief system or a thought pattern or a wound that has been operating unconsciously, has been sort of running in the background for decades, that you're just now coming to terms with, that you're just now sort of getting to witness through a new lens. And that's really what this is all about. And that's what I want to go into today, is the relationship with the inner child and our higher self, our adult self, and how that really plays out in our lives, and how we can work with that dynamic, the oscillation between those two aspects of us, in order to feel more whole, in order to access our wholeness more frequently on a day-to-day basis. And now that we're in the month of Aquarius, it's really going to be a radical time. It's going to be a radical month. We'll have a stellium in Aquarius that begins later this week. And then when we move deeper into Aquarius season, every planet, so Venus and Mars, Mercury is there right now, will have to pass through Pluto. So it's a checkpoint of sorts. It's this deepening into the energy that planet carries. So we have Mercury currently conjunct Aquarius, which is the mind. We have Mars that will be passing through Pluto, passing by Pluto as well. And we'll have Venus. So by next week, we'll have a really, really strong stellium in Aquarius, which means that we'll be fully in the Aquarian energy, leaning into the Aquarian lessons, harvesting the medicine from the shadow of Aquarius and working towards the light of it, the evolved aspects of Aquarius. But especially with Pluto being involved, and this is something the next 20 years we'll be moving through Aquarian shadow in order to access the light of it, the opportunity within Aquarius. And so in many ways, this month is sort of a foreshadowing or a precursor to what the next 20 years will look like, what we'll be working through, the themes, the patterns. Pluto's job is to surface, it's to reveal, it's to help us transform, it's to help us really alchemize the wounds so we can harness our power in a more evolved way. And in so many ways, I think Saturn's job is it's sort of the maturation planet, right? It really holds our hand in a quite intense way as we cross these maturational thresholds. But Pluto's job is similar. It's really to reveal the spaces within us that we self-abandon or we surrender our power in very subtle, unconscious ways. The subconscious it can be a maze of sorts, and when we're in that space, which we are very much in the subconscious this week, so it's an opportunity to not become attached to what's going through your mind, but simply observing and, being curious and willing to really work with what's coming up. But when we're working through the maze of the subconscious, it can be really confusing because we feel like it's reality, right? These thoughts, these beliefs, they feel like reality sometimes. And it's really our job to work with our nervous system, to work with our mind, to practice embodiment in order to move through and out of the loop. So as we kind of start this Aquarian stellium this week, and we'll be building towards it over the next 2 weeks, and we'll really be looking at all areas of our life, essentially, will be under review. We have Mercury, our mind, our communication, Mars, which is our assertiveness, our drive, sort of our will, and then Venus, which is relationships, money. So everything will come under review over the next few weeks, and we'll kind of get a little glimpse into the themes that we'll really be working through over the next 20 years. So it can feel like, a pretty intense time. On the 6th, we also have Venus squaring the lunar node. So really noticing our relational dynamics, our relationship with money, our relationship with power, with ourself, with others, how our relationship with self is really the foundation for all of our relationships. And so we're examining that, as the lunar nodes pass through Aries and Libra. And then as we move towards the new moon on the 9th, on the 8th, the moon conjuncts Pluto, which is really revealing to us and giving us a glimpse of our inner landscape, of our emotional realm, of what's actually occurring within us in relationship to the past, power, control. It's a fixed sign. So, looking at where we sort of are rigid in the ways in which we navigate our inner landscape. And this new moon on the 9th is interesting because it's square Uranus. And so Aquarius is ruled by Uranus and Saturn. And it's this push and pull between liberation, freedom, breaking out of boxes and patterns, and honoring structure, stability, discipline. There's a bit of a push and pull there, this desire for freedom and also this desire to find consistency. And this new moon is all about breaking free from the things that no longer serve, the limiting beliefs, things that are keeping us held in the past, the wounds. As we know, Aquarian energy is such a theme for our lifetimes, but especially the next 20 years as we have, Pluto in Aquarius, and it's really showing us where our deep evolutionary work lies within this timeline that we exist within. And so when we look at it through that lens, we see this new moon as an opportunity, right? Every time we have a new moon, that it's an opportunity to clear the slate, to integrate, to create, to begin a new cycle, essentially. And so when we think about a new moon in Aquarius, we're thinking about our relationship to rules, to structure, to beliefs, to anything held within the mind. Both Aquarius and Taurus are fixed signs. So there's a sense of rigidity that can come in with that, perhaps in its shadow and an inability to see outside of its own experience. So it's super important to work with the higher aspects of these signs, both of their abilities to create healing. Aquarius has this revolutionary energy, right? This desire for truth, this desire to honor truth over anything else. And in so many ways, this time is really about identifying the parts of us that are standing in our way of living more in alignment, more in abundance, more in love, and acknowledging that we are actually in control of our experience, that we get to choose how we respond to life, breaking free from the patterns keeping us small, and recognizing that it's not actually the external forces that are keeping us small, but it's our own beliefs around our abilities to move through those boxes that's keeping us small. It's acknowledging the ways in which we're living in victim consciousness without even knowing it, right? It can be so subtle and so sort of subterranean that we don't even actually realize we're living in that space. But that's the space where we stay looping. That's the inner child space where we feel like we don't have the power to break free from the patterns, to break free from the boxes we've created for ourselves. So in many ways, this week will be revealing what's occurring within our subterranean space that's keeping us looping, that's keeping us held in past vibrations, past patterns that are no longer serving, that are really keeping us small, right? And this month in particular will be this subterranean journey through the underworld as these planets pass by Pluto. It'll be a checkpoint to sort of say, okay, these are the themes of the next chapter. This is what you're examining, over the next 1, 5, 10, 20 years. You might notice that you're closing doors on the things you've been navigating, sort of the beliefs or like a layer of it, and opening up new chapters of healing, which is really common right now as we move back and forth through the Capricorn, Aquarian transit of Pluto. I myself have been noticing these really sort of sneaky, subtle ways that I drop into this victim consciousness that I, haven't felt before, right? I've always felt like a really optimistic, expansive person. I have a Sagittarius moon. It's always been sort of easy for me to access the expansiveness within spaces. But what I didn't realize is that there's this part of me, this inner child part. There's a very young part of me that can easily drop into that victim mindset. It can drop into this hole and it feels like she can't get out of it. And it occurs when a lot of things happen all at once. And I have worked with this space before. It's a collapse within my nervous system. It's this looping that occurs where it feels like everything is happening to me and I'm doomed or I'm fated to live in this cycle, this like sort of plutonic cycle. I have Pluto in my first house. So when a lot of things happen at once that overwhelm my system and I go into that space of overwhelm, I can easily go into this collapse. And it takes a bit of time for me to actually see what's occurring because I'm experiencing a physical collapse as well. My system is shutting down. My belief systems are mirroring my physical experience, my somatic experience. And it's only happened, a few times over the last 10 years. But when it happens, I know that I'm crossing a big threshold and I'm being asked to really parent the parts that are feeling collapse, that are feeling hopeless, that are feeling like the world is happening to them, and to find my inner sovereignty, my inner adult, my higher self who is whole, who is capable, who is strong, resilient, highly intelligent, expansive, and to take back my power from this young part that feels like if she doesn't take the steering wheel, that everything will collapse and everything will dissolve and everything will fall apart. And so there's this beautiful energy that we get to work with right now, this opportunity to sort of glimpse beneath the surface to see where we're dropping into victim consciousness, into this collapse, even if it's extremely subtle. I know many of you are not people who would maybe identify with that victim consciousness, and it's a very confronting topic. This is something I move through with clients where we have to, in order to really cross these thresholds, we have to take a radically honest look at what's occurring within our lives, what patterns are playing out, what systems are in place, where we're really operating from. And when we do, we realize that we aren't that collapsed younger part. We realize that we are highly intelligent, expansive, strong, resilient adults, that we get to parent the parts that feel alone or isolated or disempowered. And we get to give them what they needed when they experienced the wounding, or they experienced the trauma, or they experienced the fragmentation, so that they don't feel like they need to take control over our lives. And it's from that space, that empowered space, that whole space, that adult higher self space, where we really create the change, where we catapult into new timelines, into new chapters. And so many times I'm working with people and they come to me and they've been trying to work through a pattern for years and years and years, right? And when we actually witness the pattern, we realize we have so much more control within that space than we think we do. And it's only when we drop into the victimness, into this belief that the world is happening to us and that bad things occur for us, where we lose our power. We have this innate wholeness. We're already whole. We're already whole. We are already healed. We are already completely and fully capable of navigating what we need to within this life. And that wholeness is where our higher self, our adult self, resides. It's our center point. It's only when we get pulled out of our wholeness, out of our center point, where we start to believe these things, these ideas that we are weak or unworthy or incapable, that we collapse into that space. And it's a whole physiological event. It's a nervous system collapse. So it's important to remember that you can't really just approach this through mindset shifts. I mean, that's a beautiful practice. And I think that it's supportive of the deep root work, but it's important to know that there are roots that exist within these belief systems. There's a somatic experience in that root. And there's an unconscious pattern playing out in the body, not just the mind. And so when we deviate from that wholeness, when we pull out from that wholeness through, a trigger or a life event that occurs that drops us into a state of fear or grief or whatever it is, we can fall into that looping that occurs within the wound outside of our wholeness. And that space is tricky, right? Because it tells us a story, and that story feels like reality because it's coming from our subconscious, and we can't decipher what's real and what isn't within that space, or what's happening now and what has happened in the past. So the real practice of healing is noticing when we're outside of our wholeness, when we're in a wound, and what that space, what that wound needs in the present moment in order to feel softened, in order to feel like we can move through it, transmute, alchemize, and love that aspect of us, and then reparent the part, love the part, reteach it, rewire it, so that it doesn't feel like it needs to hijack our lives. It feels safe enough to let go of control over us. And it's when we find that sense of safety that we find our sense of belonging, we find our sense of empowerment, we are able to access all of the potential timelines available to us in each moment. But when we're in that collapsed, wounded space, the space of the inner child, the part that felt like she or he had no control within the experience they were having in the past, When we're in that space, the world feels very small. It feels small, it feels big, it feels scary, it feels overwhelming. We drop into coping mechanisms, addictive patterns and habits, scrolling, consuming things that aren't good for us. And then that keeps us held in that pattern, you see? So there's this familiarity with being in the wound that occurs where, it might be super uncomfortable, but it might also be comforting in a way because it's familiar. And when we're really being asked to cross thresholds and change, which we are now, just energetically, like there's just this sort of energetic layer that exists within the world where we're being asked to grow and evolve in big ways. So that's happening on the subconscious level. Like we're existing within that frequency. And it's asking for us to cross these thresholds. And of course, when that happens, I've talked a lot about this, but when we're asked to cross a threshold, we are asked to integrate all of our parts that feel afraid of change, that feel afraid of stepping outside of its safety systems and what they've known for so long, the familiar patterns. So like I said, the work is really noticing where we're outside of our center point, our wholeness, our adult self, our higher self, whatever we want to call it, where the wound is, acknowledging, parenting, loving that wounded part so it can see that our wholeness is actually the safe space. Our adult self is capable and strong and resilient so that it doesn't feel like it needs to hijack our process, to integrate the somatic work, to retrain our body, that the somatic experience it's having is being pulled from the past and not from the present. And then to try to stay as much as possible every day in that wholeness, in that center point. And that's really the practice. It's when I say that, are you existing in the wound or the higher heart? That's what I'm talking about. Like, are we pulling from our wholeness? Are we projecting our thoughts, beliefs from that space? Or are they coming from the wounded aspects of us? And that's why the work I do is called alignment work. It's called the integration of self, because we have these parts that get activated at certain points through our lives to just reveal to us that they're there, that they need more love and more light to be integrated, and so that we can operate more from our wholeness and from our higher self rather than from our wounding, our inner child. And so this victim consciousness, and that's kind of a strong word, right? Like we associate victimness with shadow, and really what it means is it's just a collapse within us. It's a space that we get stuck within where we believe that we cannot move out of it. And so all of these belief systems get downloaded in that tell us the world is scary, that the world is happening to us, that we don't have agency or the ability to respond to it in an empowered way from the space of our wholeness. And victim consciousness is really born from the wounded parts. It's a blend of nervous system dysregulation and limiting beliefs that keep us stuck in a loop, stuck in a pattern. And that's where we want to work within, is within that patterning space where the loop occurs, where the wound is. So like I said, this week is a big one. It's the next few weeks really will be quite profound. The month of February, it's a shorter month. It's a big month, and it's going to be revealing a lot to us. It will reveal a lot to us internally, what systems are at play, where we're giving away our power, right? That's the thing with victim consciousness, is it's really us giving away our power. When we realize our power, when we realize we're in a loop of victim consciousness, when we feel like we are disempowered because external forces are more powerful than we are, everything feels hopeless, right? We lose hope in our ability to navigate it with agency, with power, with intelligence. And that collapse is where we stay looping. And like I said, this can be either very apparent in your world. You might consistently go into this deep, dark cycle, this spiral, or it might be really subtle. And so it's important now to look at where this lies where we lie along the spectrum of this work. And to be radically honest with ourselves, if you've been on this journey for quite a while, you might, listen to this and say, oh, I don't ever drop into victim consciousness. And I would actually challenge that a little bit. I think it's available within all of us. And there's this collective work occurring within this space where we're being asked to really take a radical look within our own belief systems, within our own physical experience, within our own framework, to see where this pattern lies. And you might have done a lot of work on this before, so you might feel like it's gone or transmuted, and it might be, which is beautiful. Or it might be existing in a very subtle way, playing out in your life in ways that you didn't expect it to be. That's the thing about the subconscious work and the somatic work, is that these roots can kind of grow arms into many aspects of our lives in ways we didn't expect. And to not shame that part is the important piece here, because it's really, really a young version of us that's needing love, that did not receive what they needed to in that timeline, and now are operating from a void space, or operating from a space of hopelessness, or a space of lack of agency. And that void creates a vacuum, and it pulls us into it. It sucks us into it. And it feels like we can't escape it, even if it's so subtle. And this really could be occurring within any aspect of life. There's not a particular focus right now, because we're having, Mars, Venus, and Mercury all pass by Pluto. So everything is really under review. There's not one area of our life that isn't being touched by these transits. So I would encourage you this week, especially as we move into the new moon on Friday, to really think about where this pattern could potentially be playing out, where you're limiting yourself, where you're afraid to sort of step into a new timeline, where there's perhaps something occurring that feels out of reach, or where you're afraid to step into your power, where control is playing out in your life, trying to keep things safe and small. And downloading, as you begin this new chapter, this new lunar cycle, the knowing that you are in full control over your agency, your power, your ability to navigate this life at the frequency you want. And all of this to say, there are experiences that we have that are really traumatic, that are really challenging. And I'm not asking you to bypass that experience. I'm asking you to deepen into it, to know that there's medicine within that. And that is not at all discounting the experiences that you've had. We have so many experiences within our life that are just hard, right? They're just challenging, and they don't always need to mean something. But we have a space within us that is able to move through that space without collapsing into it. I think so often we sort of either, move through challenge in a way that bypasses it, and we feel like we sort of need to distract ourselves or keep really busy in order to not feel the immensity of the emotion held within that experience. Or we're on the other side of the spectrum and we're collapsed into it, and we can't find our agency. We can't find the light. We can't find our power within that space to move out of it. And the beautiful thing is there's a middle space. There's a space where you get to feel it. You get to feel what you need to. You get to honor the experience, to grieve as long as you need to honor the parts of you that are being activated, the change that's occurring due to this experience, to have ceremony around it, but not lose your power within it, to not collapse into it, to not get stuck into the loop of it. And I believe one of the biggest pieces of this healing process that we're discussing, or this ability to sort of be with what's there without losing yourself in it, is the nervous system, is somatic work, and is really incorporating that in with the energy work, in with the quantum healing, in with the subconscious work, whatever work you're doing. That's why I bring all of it into my containers with my clients, because I know that we can't simply approach it through quantum healing or through energy work or subconscious work. We have to really get into the body and help it move through the experience as well, to teach it that what it's experiencing is okay and valid, to allow the charge to process through, so that we can access the present moment, the middle space, the body that feels safe and regulated. Because that's where our adult self, our higher self, and our wholeness exists. And the card I pulled today for all of you within this community is the Phoenix card from the Untamed Elemental Deck. I think I have that deck linked in my show notes. I've had a few people ask, but you can always go into my show notes to find this deck and purchase it. But I'm not deviating from it. I just love it so much. I feel like it's really aligned with this community. So it's fun to stay consistent with a deck for a long period of time. And I pulled the Phoenix card, which feels just so in alignment with the things we've been talking about and through this episode and the energetic climate that we're currently in. And it's all about resurrection. Phoenix is the pillar of eternal light, presenting vital passages of cyclical regeneration. Phoenix is always transforming through birth, death, and resurrection. When everything that once was is no longer, he activates birth through fire and fortitude. Once he has offered his complete existence to the sacred flames, a new phoenix emerges out of the ash, and he arises young and powerful. The new phoenix is an emanation of his ancestors' labor and wisdom, refreshed and ready to give his gifts to the world. Phoenix sends the message that a part of your life is undergoing resurrection. He facilitates the inward journey that is necessary before any rebirth. Nothing real can ever be lost. Let his medicine lay claim to all that is no longer relevant to your ever-evolving existence. Surrender yourself to the fire of renewal, and you will return reborn, refined, and with more beauty and power than you could have possibly imagined. And when it's balanced, relaxed, trusting of the process. When it's imbalanced, there's inner conflict with what is. And to bring into balance, allow yourself to grieve what has ended and incorporate deep rest. Thank you so much for being here, for your presence, for your devotion to being a more evolved version of yourself. If you're here, you're in that process. So thank you. Your inner work is what changes the world. And I just really appreciate your support of the podcast. It means the world. Like I said, I think I say this in every episode, but I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here and for your presence. It truly means the world. If you feel called, subscribe, review, share on Instagram. All of these things help me so much to create this podcast, to create the space to do it, the time, the money, the investment, all the things. And I am opening up more space for private mentorship beginning in March. So this month I will be doing clarity calls, discovery calls with anyone who's interested in beginning this journey together. It's a really deep, powerful 3-month container where we meet bi-weekly, go into really deep sessions around a lot of what I've discussed within this episode. So belief systems, patterns, wounded aspects that are keeping us out of our wholeness, out of our center point, to reparent and to work with those in order to create more wholeness and alignment within our lives. I truly believe that the more time we can spend in wholeness, accessing our adult self, our higher self, the more we can access beauty, joy, fulfillment, all of the things we crave more of. And the more time we can spend in that wholeness is dependent upon how familiar or intimate we are with all of our different parts that are operating. So if you're interested in working with me in this intimate container, this is the most, intimate, powerful way to do work together. So you can just book a clarity call on my website. I'd love to connect. I hope you all have a beautiful, powerful Aquarius new moon and a beautiful week. Thank you for being here.